Hi church, Pastor Renier here. We live in an extraordinary time with an extraordinary opportunity to share the gospel. And therefore, join me for my mini midweek message. It is time to shine. This week, our message comes from Luke chapter 6. And Jesus was having this conversation with people, and he was using the example of a tree and its fruit. And he was talking about that there was no good tree bears bad fruit, and likewise no bad tree bears good fruit. And he went on to say, for out of the overflow of his heart his mouth speaks. But just before that, he also then says the good man brings good things out of the good stored up in his heart, and the evil man brings evil things out of the evil stored up in his heart. And then the point he makes is, for out of the overflow of his heart, his mouth speaks. And then I just want to jump a verse on, and it says, I will show you what he is like who comes to me and hears my word and puts them into practice. And he then went on to use an example. And so this message is entitled, He Who Hears and Put It in Practice. The question we ask today is, what lives in the overflow of your heart? And when Jesus quoted that passage, he was actually referring to Proverbs. And in Proverbs chapter 4, verse 23, it also says, above else, guard your heart, for it's the wellspring of life. Why are we bringing all these things together? For us as followers of Christ, we have been given an extraordinary opportunity to share the gospel. Now, sharing the gospel is not just telling people about the good news of Jesus. It is also putting into practice, having our whole lives shaped by that. And Jesus was pointing out in this very thing, it is not only about things that we do that makes us followers of Christ. It is something far more. It is actually our identities that shapes who we are, that reflects our relationship, and that is what is seen in the practice. Our mission as followers of Jesus is to be kingdom-minded, Christ-centered, gospel-focused, kingdom influencers for short. And so Jesus is saying is, what is living in the overflow of your heart? And then he went on to say, when you hear, put it into practice. And then in Proverbs he says, above all else, guard your heart. How are all these concepts connected? Well, for us, what I believe Jesus is teaching us in this very moment is an integrated lifestyle, a lifestyle where we are guarding what we hear and what we see, that we are guarding above all else our hearts. Because in the previous verse he said, it is from the good that we store up that we live from the overflow. I love how Billy Graham was saying that they asked him how he get around to speaking to so many million people, and he said, I keep filling up on God, because as I fill up on him, I speak from the overflow of our hearts. And so the first thing in this message today is, are you guarding your heart above all things? That is probably one of the most important questions, is guarding the gateway of your heart. Jesus knows that when we do not guard our hearts, it gives way to anything else. And in a time that we live in the way that we are surrounded by things, this is an incredible opportunity for us to guard and check for holes. So the question in this moment is, what is draining your filling? One of the biggest challenges in my life, my own life included, is that we often live unguarded lifestyles. We want the overflow of God, but yet we fail to pay attention to those little things that seem to drain. And what we then are storing up is something completely opposite. The second thing out of this is, what you are storing up. What you let in, store up. One of the most important things that we have to keep in mind is that anything that you store up in your heart takes up storage space. the question we ask is, are you willing to pay the price for what is stored within your heart, your mind? The reality is that storage space that takes up place in our minds and our heart is actually quite expensive. So how do we bring it all together? I love how Brené Brown once said that it is about what we profess and what we practice, and in the gap where we lose people. So the good news about all of this, why we want to hear and put it into practice, hear and declare, why we want to guard our heart, why we want to take notice of this message, is that very same thing, that as we share the good news of the gospel, it's not about our perfection and our ability to be always calm and peaceful, but it is how we integrate our faith and our works, what we profess and what we practice, how we put it all into one. Because as we are honest about this, as we are leaning into this space, as we are guarding our heart and our minds and everything that comes in this, we are filling up in our secret spaces with the Word of God. And as that fills up, we start to live from the overflow of God's love. The beauty of living from that overflow is it doesn't take away our circumstances, but it changes our perspective. It helps us to see the unseen. And when we see the unseen, when we get an eternal perspective on today's circumstances, there is a peace that comes about, a peace that is far greater, far more supernatural than anything else in this world. And that makes every opportunity that we have to guard our minds worth it. And so I want to close for us, and I have a prayer that I want to read out for each and every one of us today. It goes like this: Lord, help me to recognize when the enemy attacks. Help me to recognize when it seems to break through the ranks, seeking to gain a foothold in my heart. Help me to turn to you as quickly as possible, keeping short accounts with you. Help me pay attention to my emotional responses when anger, frustration, and anxiety seem to flare up, to take it to you and others so I can guard the gateway to my heart. Help me do everything possible to guard the gateway of my heart, as it is the source of being a kingdom influencer. And this is so I can store up good within myself and to live from the overflow, to speak from the overflow of my heart. Lord, help me fill up all holes within my heart so I can store up the goodness of who you are. And so, my friends, the wonderful thing that Jesus has taught us in this very passage is to put it into practice, to guard our minds and our hearts above all things, because out of that is the spring of life. Till next time.